Welcome back to the Salt and Light podcast. I am your host Shirin, and today I am really glad to be joined by my good friend Sam. Sam has been involved in ministry over the years, serving as a youth minister here in Bradford, working among the homeless and the needy, and then spending several years overseas, sharing the good news, training leaders, and helping to equip Christians to live out their faith. In our conversation today, we will explore what it looks like to follow God's call into the ministry, the joys and challenges along the way, and what the church can learn about supporting those who serve in different contexts. I believe you will find Sam's story both inspiring and thought provoking. So let's dive right in. Sam, thank you so much for being here in the Salt and Light podcast. And I wanted to interview you from some time, mostly because, of course, I know you personally, but I had known you before we ever met. In the church, we have been many times praying for you and for your work. So I had this thing in my mind. Why does a nice guy from Bradford has went so far, place in Asia too? So that was one of my motivation to speak to you. But you have moved here now, and we are in same growth group and same church. So that makes really nice. So again, welcome to Salt and Light podcast. Hope we will have a great time today.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
So I just wanted to start with your personal life. How was it growing up in Bradford? How did you become a Christian? And post that, how your life changed?
Yeah, so I grew up in Bradford. Love Bradford. Grew up in a really great Christian home. My parents are wonderful. They were heavily involved in ministry at church. My dad was the youth pastor. So grew up in a really good Christian context. And I think at maybe 12 years old, we went to Soul Survivor, a big Christian event. That was the first time I really experienced God and wanted to live for God. But then in my teenage years, got off track, really got into the things of the world quite heavily, and to a point when I was 18, I was in quite a bad place. So I was going to university, but I was struggling with some quite serious addictions at the time. I could see the kind of direction my life was going in. I felt I had to do something. And a really strange moment driving back from university. I think I'd been to view one in, I think it was Loughborough University, driving back with my mum, and just sat there quietly thinking about university. And in that moment, it felt like God spoke to me audibly. It wasn't audible, but that's what it felt like. And just felt him saying, Sam, you need to make a decision now. Do you want the things of the world, or do you want to serve me? And if you don't make the decision for me now, you never will. Now, theologically, whether that's true, I don't know whether I would have had a second chance afterwards, but it felt like there was an urgency and I had to make a decision. So I said to my mum, I need to do something. I don't think I can go to university. I'm going to struggle to be a Christian. I think I'll go too far into the things I'm already kind of involved in. And she said, well, why don't you go to Bible college? There's a guy from our church. He's moved to Hungary. He's a pastor at a Bible college. Why don't you go to Hungary? I just said, yeah. No idea what I was getting myself in for. So I was carrying on in the things of the world. I remember, just kind of the night before I went, smoking my last cigarettes and doing my last substance days and thinking this is the last time I'm going to do it. And then just turning up at Bible college and kind of cold turkeying with all these addictions. And nobody there had a clue. Everyone thought I was just this kind of good Christian boy from England. There's a lot of Americans, and I just come straight out of the world and sat at the back of the first service at Bible college and said, God, I have no idea who you are. I have no idea if you're real. No idea what I'm doing here. But if you are real, kind of, reveal yourself to me, and I'm ready, I'm willing. And I went to do the missions training program because it was the shortest program. I was always attracted to the missionary life. It seemed kind of adventurous and fun. But I wasn't sure I wanted to be a missionary. It's just a one-year program, so I thought I'd do the missionary program because it's shorter. Got invited back for a second year. got in contact with a lot of missionaries at the college, and that's where I got my calling for missions.
Thank you, Sam, on that. If I take just one step back on your response, so you told uh, the place where you made a decision to follow God when you got that prompting from God. Um, to be honest, I have seen many people getting that prompt and not following through. Um, why do you feel you had was able to make the right decision in the sense that you were able to tell your mom that I think I want to change his life? Uh, was it was there something in the upbringing which prompted you to do that?
I always had a fear of God in a healthy way. So I mentioned about my experience when I was maybe around 12 years old at Soul Survivor. I have another memory of when perhaps I was 13, so not long after this experience with God. And I was walking out from my house and I was going to meet some friends. And at that point, I'd started smoking weed and doing a few different things. And I was walking down and we were going to go off and get up to no good. And that's the other time in my life where I felt God almost audibly speak to me. So maybe around 13, I'm walking down from my house. I can still picture it so clearly. I felt God saying to me, Sam, you need to move on from these friends, or you're not going to carry on with the faith that you found at these Christian events, and kind of where you are, you're going to lose that really quick. I remember saying, I can't, God, I can't do it. This is my life, my friends. If I don't have them, I've got nothing. This is what I live for. And effectively, I just said no to God at that moment. And from that point on, I just went way off into the things of the world. But I still had a fear of God. So the times where I was in dark places, and I remember certain times feeling like God was in the room with me, and just, it never left me that sense that God was real. So even though I wasn't walking with him, I never really doubted his existence too much. I felt that, God was real to a degree. I didn't fully work out that, but I just had this sense that God was real and I had a fear of him in a healthy way. And when I was going to university, it was just that sense, it's really going to be too late. And to kind of backtrack a bit more, I'd had something happen maybe a month before where, under the influence of substances, and I got up to some pretty awful stuff. Found myself walking home from Leeds to Bradford at maybe 4 in the morning. And I remember everybody said to me, Sam, you've gone too far. You need to think about where you are. Without going into details of what I got up to. And I didn't care. I remember walking home thinking, I don't care. And I walked 20 miles home, the hours of the morning, a pack of cigarettes in my pocket. I thought, I don't care. I don't need anyone. I didn't feel guilty about what I did when I should have felt guilty about it. I should have felt shame. And then I think I woke up the next day and I felt afraid about how hard you can become, because that's what sin does. And I was in a place where I was losing that sensitivity, and I no longer cared, even about shameful things, even about, violence and physical things. Didn't feel any guilt for the things I'd done. And that scared me. It scared me about what you can become. None of us are beyond those things. If you just compromise, you find yourself in a place that you never thought you'd be. You thought you were better than that, but then you find yourself doing things that you thought you'd never do. So I think some of it was just that realization that I was getting so hard. I was so full of hatred and so full of coldness to God, to people, to right and wrong. And I think that just brought me to that place where I sensed the urgency, and that feeling of God speaking to me very, resonated with me, because I knew I was getting to a place where I didn't care anymore. I don't know whether it was the upbringing, the Christian background that always kind of put that fear of God in me, or whether it was just, God's pursuit of me and the Holy Spirit just not letting me go and convicting me. But there was something there throughout my teenage years that kept pulling me back. And at 18, I just knew that was the moment. And I think if I didn't speak out to my mum in that moment in the car, I probably wouldn't have. It was a spontaneous thing where I just said, okay, I'll do it. And she arranged everything. And even when the process was going on, I was thinking, why am I going to Hungary? Why am I leaving my own country and going to this place where I don't know anybody? But I think because I just took the courage to speak out in the moment and to listen to conviction in the moment, I think that's why I was able to do it.
Appreciate you sharing that. So what happened after your Bible college?
So I met my wife, Hannah, who's from America. She's a wonderful, wonderful, amazing person. And I was first attracted to her during a prayer meeting. Now, you shouldn't be thinking about these things during a prayer meeting. You should be thinking about God and praying. But I was listening to her pray. And she was praying. We'd been on an evangelism trip, and she was praying about this old man that she'd had some time to talk to and to witness to, and he kind of rejected what she was saying. And she was so broken that he won't receive the gospel, and she was praying for him. And she was weeping. She was just crying. And she was just so broken for this man. And I thought, wow, I want to marry this woman. I just love that compassion and that zeal for the gospel. And by that time, I think it was into my second semester. And I was in a place where at this point I did feel a call to missions, and I was passionate about the gospel, and I wanted to be a full-time ministry. And I just saw her heart in prayer. I also heard her lead a Bible study, and she gave just a really powerful message. And I thought, yeah, I'd love to be married to this woman. And when I was going home during one break, she sent a book for me to take home. I didn't know her well, but she sent a book, and it was The Shadow of the Almighty by Elizabeth Elliot. Just an incredible book about Jim Elliot's life and their life together, doing missions work. And that inspired me. And when I went back, we got chatting about that, and we realized that we had this shared passion for missions work. And when we first started dating, I said, are you sure you want to get involved with me? Because I want to be a missionary. I don't care about the things of the world. I'm not going to pursue a career. I'm not going to have any money. Probably going to live in rough conditions. If you're willing to live in a mud hut and do anything with me, she said, I'm willing. I thought, wow, you're the right person. Let's get married. We share the same goal. So yeah, that's how we got together. So she moved to England, we got married, and we felt a call to kind of international missions. But initially we felt it was right to come back to Bradford, and I started working full-time at a church in Bradford.
So when you said about international missions, so how was that process? Were you looking at the map and finding places? Because I have heard stories of people they kind of look up at a map and kind of pray and kind of choose a place. How was that process for you?
It was a really missions-focused Bible college. So every week we would pray for a different country. We'd look at kind of the demographics and where the gospel is spread in that country and what the needs were. So I was exposed to that kind of thinking. Did want to do international missions. I always felt a call back to Bradford. There's a lot of needs in Bradford. But I had that sense that even though there's a lot of needs in Bradford, there's also a lot of churches. There's also a lot of Christians in Bradford. There's people available here. And I wanted to be amongst the unreached. I wanted to be where there wasn't a Christian presence, where there was a need for people to go out and reach the unreached. So that was always one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the unreached. But I didn't. College, we had to learn a language. I started learning Spanish just because it was a common language, but I had no idea where I wanted to be. So I can't remember any Spanish now, but I started learning a bit. I had no direction really. Came back to Bradford, and that was an issue. We were back for 6 years, loved what we were doing in Bradford, but we were always had this feeling, how do we actually get into missionary life? How do we make that step? How do we know where God's calling us specifically? How do you find out God's will in these areas? And we were praying for direction for many, many years, at the same time trying to be present and trying to be kind of very active in what we were doing in Bradford, but knowing that ultimately, we've been called to go on the foreign mission field.
So ultimately, it was a step of faith, right?
Yeah, so we loved our time in Bradford. So I think if you call to foreign missions, you have to be missionary where you are first. You have to demonstrate that. So if anyone came to me and said, I feel a calling to missionary work, I'd say, great, what are you currently doing? What do you do in your church? What do you do in your area? Because missionary life requires a lot of motivation and initiative and pioneering. You've got to be a go-getter. You've got to, and that's a struggle because you're out there often on your own without you should have accountability, but you don't have day-to-day accountability. You've got to get up and go out and connect with people and make inroads into the community. That requires a lot of motivation and a certain kind of personality type and a real passion for the gospel. So if you're not doing it presently where you are, don't go abroad and think you're going to flip a switch and start doing it, because you won't. So we were very intentional in what we did in Bradford, and we moved into a particular area to minister. We were going out, taking young people out every weekend onto the streets to do evangelism, to talk to people, to engage with people about the gospel. Going out with a close friend every week, one night, if not two, into the early hours of the morning, talking to people at nightclubs, talking to the homeless, taking out coffee, flasks of coffee and sleeping bags and Bibles and things, and giving stuff out and engaging with people. And we did that for years. So we're very active within the church and outside. We even set up church outdoors. So Bradford, close to Bradford Foster Square, there's the Arches, the old cobbled street, and we bought some foldable chairs, and we got a speaker, and we started doing services out on the streets, and we would have people come and walking past, and they'd just sit down and they'd listen to the worship and would give a message. And we did a lot of ministry in Bradford. It's a wonderful time. How did we move from that to the foreign mission field? That same friend who went to Hungary, which was the initial contact for me going to Bible college, he moved to New Zealand to start a Bible college in New Zealand, which was a similar idea, to train up missionaries from New Zealand, from America, from different countries, and to send them out into all different areas around the world to do missions work. And he was back in Bradford, and he said, Sam, what are you waiting for? What is it? What is it that you need from God to get you to take that step? I said, well, I feel like I need kind of a clear calling. I need a moment where I can say, God's called me to this country and talk. And his challenge was, it often doesn't, it happens like that for some people, but generally speaking, it doesn't. You have to take, like you say, a step of faith. We spoke to a lot of people who had felt called to missions, who told us their stories about, feeling called to missions as young people, but never actually making that step. And that got us thinking that if you don't eventually just say, we're going to do it, we're going to go, you probably never will. And there was a little quote, and I think God was speaking to me a lot in this season, but I saw a quote as well, and it said something like, at the end of your life, you won't regret the things that you tried and failed in doing. You'll regret the things that you didn't try. And what struck me was, if I go on the mission field and we have a terrible time and it's really difficult, we won't regret it, because you made a step of faith. You try to follow God. Whatever happens, you feel like you've done the right thing and you've lived by your convictions and you've gone and done it. If we'd stayed at home and we'd lived a life and looked back and said, you know what, we had this calling and we never actually went, I think I'd really struggle to look back at my life and not feel regret. So we said, we have to do it. We just have to make a step. The guy who came back, who was in New Zealand, he said, why don't you come to New Zealand? And we said, sounds great. New Zealand sounds really fun, but it's not kind of our vision of where we want to be in terms of doing missions work. And he said, well, why don't you come? Why don't you do some teaching at the college, train up other people to go into the ministry? And just that sense of moving, leaving England, getting out of your home, taking a step, that will get you moving. And from there, it'll be a lot easier. We started praying for countries like Papua New Guinea, different countries in that area. And that was our thinking. The earthquake hit Nepal in 2015. We started praying for Nepal as a family, praying regularly. and God started kind of softening our hearts for Nepal. Never thought about Nepal before as a destination for us and for doing missions work. But we started praying, and I just looked up a Bible college in Kathmandu that was connected to the denomination we were working with. Sent them an email, said, hey, we're praying for Nepal. We're looking for our next step. We're currently in New Zealand. We're trying to think where to go. They said, why don't you come and visit? So I went to visit with my friend. Hannah didn't come with me. My wife didn't. My friend Tom, his wife didn't come with me. Just the two of us. We went for a week. We just loved it. As soon as we got there, we said, this is where God wants us to be. Went back and we said, love it. Are you willing to go with us? And a few months later, our family and their family, we moved out to Nepal.
So how was your period in Nepal? What was the main?
So we went initially. So connection with this Bible college. We, my wife Hannah was working at a school. I was connected with a lot of. It's a little bit sensitive in terms of everything I can talk about, but I worked with a lot of different organizations. But my primary goal was to raise up and equip leaders for the ministry, and that was based in Kathmandu, but all around. Alongside that, there was a lot of kind of development and social programs that we were involved in as well, working with a children's charity and working at a leprosy colony, which became really precious aspects of what we did there. And as we look back, some of our most kind of significant ministry was at the leprosy colony and with this children's charity. But my primary focus was discipleship. So equipping and supporting local leaders, because I always wanted to do something that was going to outlive my time there. So as a foreigner in a different country, I'm not the one who's going to take the church forward in Nepal, and I shouldn't be. That should be local Nepali leaders who are doing that. I'm just there for a season to support, say, how can I help you? How can I learn from you as well? Because I had a lot to learn. How can I learn from you? What can I give to you in terms of my experience? How can we support one another? And how can I do something that's going to be meaningful moving forward, even after we've left? And I always felt that the way to do that is to invest in leaders. You invest in leaders, and after you're gone, those are the ones that are going to take the work forward.
So, how was culturally different for you from moving from west to east? How was the culture different, and how, in particular, Christianity, differed in terms of how you see it in the west versus how you see it there?
Wow, yeah, very different. I mean, culturally so different, but we loved it. Hannah and I both loved it. We love traveling. We love different cultures. We love different foods. So for us, initially going, it wasn't this shock of, wow, this is so difficult, so different. We just embraced it and loved it. And that was a strong conviction of ours as well, was to go and to just fully immerse ourselves in the culture and to be as like a Nepali as we can be, just to fully embrace the way things are done, the food, everything, the language, to learn the language and to be fully invested in the culture. It was very different. It was a lot slower paced than Western culture, which I really appreciated. So a lot of my days I'd go into work, and then you'd have someone say, come on, let's go get some tea. And then you'd go back and someone else would come and visit and they'd say, let's go get some tea. And I'd go home and Hannah would say, what do you do today? I said, well, I had tea with this person, I had tea with this person, I had tea. And you spend so much time just interacting. It was very slow paced, which I loved. Obviously, the food, the smells, the geography, everything, the driving.
You like the driving?
I did, but I think one thing to mention is at the start you just have this excitement because things are so different and it's fun. So driving, when we first went, we didn't have a car. I was just riding my bicycle around, through the traffic, and it was so much fun. Later, I was driving. It was so much fun. After a few years, it's less fun and it's more frustrating. And I was thinking, I wish there were some more rules here. Same with kind of administration. Initially, you would just laugh, renewing visas, all those kind of processes were so difficult. And in the beginning, it was fun. You'd go to renew a visa, it'd take you 3 days to do it. You'd be sent around so many people. Well, this person has to put a stamp on, this person has to sign this person has to do this, or come back tomorrow, because you'd laugh about it. After a number of years, those things did get a little bit frustrating. Also around kind of, I guess, planning, organization, what I'd grown up with was a lot more, let's plan, let's put dates in, let's have kind of a very structured way of doing stuff. Culture is very different there. It's just a lot more spontaneous and we'll get by. And appreciated that at other times it was frustrating, but that's part of doing cross-cultural work. You have to adapt and get used to it.
I can empathize with that, because now when I go back to India, I get a bit frustrated with the driving and with people keeping time. So I can understand that. Now let's move, let's say, from your own personal side to world missions as such. Has the landscape changed a lot? We have more. We have less and less unreached areas now compared to 100 years before. The needs have changed. There's a lot of technology now. So how the mission world has changed over the time?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I mean, there's still many unreached people groups. So there's still a need for this traditional style of missionary work, in my opinion. I think the landscape of Christianity just generally has changed. So I don't think the hub of Christianity is the West anymore. When you look at where Christianity is really booming and growing and vibrant, then you're looking at Africa, you're looking at Asia. So I don't think it's the old kind of colonial model of Western Christians, we need to help developing countries. Hopefully that's a thing of the past, especially kind of that idea of some superiority in culture. We're going to bring the gospel and we're going to help you as well. Hopefully that's a thing of the past. I think missionary work goes both ways now. So I don't see it as the white man's burden, Western missionaries going to developing countries anymore. We have some amazing missionaries in Bradford, from China, from South Korea. Some of the best missionaries that I worked alongside in Nepal were from Korea. So I think missions is shifting now because it's going in all directions. You have missionaries going both ways. We send missionaries to Brazil. Brazil will send missionaries here. We send missionaries to Nepal. You have a lot of Nepalis here now doing missions work as well. So it's definitely changing. You mentioned online. I think there's the scope for doing things online. I still see a need for your classic feet on the ground missionary work, especially in unreached areas. But like I say, even beyond that, because it's that global mindset of we still have something to give as we go. We bring something different both ways. So the church here is very different to the church in Nepal, to the church in China. And I think if you have this kind of global partnership of missionaries going in all directions, then we collaborate and it's best practice and it becomes this wonderful kind of blend of different cultures. It becomes a more mature form of Christianity. So our church, for example, is a wonderful mix of different cultures and you have a really vibrant expression of Christianity because of it. So I think, movement across countries and that kind of missionary work is really important. As I said, there's still many unreached people groups. And that's, in my opinion, should be the focus for missions work now as well.
Okay. So kind of one follow-up questions from that. So you mentioned people from East is now coming to West, and so they have missionaries here. We are people from West are going to the East. Yeah. So a mathematical question arises in my mind that why we need to travel. Why can't people in the West evangelize people in the West, and why can't people in the East can do that? Is it in the sense that it makes a lot of difference when you actually travel to different places, that it just makes more sense?
I do think there's a degree of that as well. I mean, that should be the goal, and that was our goal. It wasn't for me to go and to say, okay, I'm going to be here, I'm going to pastor a church, I'm going to do evangelism, I'm going to do this. No, I'm going to go and bring my expertise to help local people do that for themselves. So I think it's more that mindset of I'm going in to support and to help you to do this for the local people to do it. I think sometimes it's a motivation factor as well, isn't it? If you go as a missionary, you're driven and you're motivating local people to say we need to be about the gospel. And sometimes someone coming from outside whose focus is that coming in, they can challenge some complacency. And I think for us as well, it's the same, because we can have the mindset, well, actually, we've got churches here. We don't need you to come from China here and to do this work. No, we do. It motivates us and it really helps us. So, we've got somebody in our growth group, and just listen to her testimony about the work she's doing amongst the ladies in Bradford. Just so inspired by that. I'm thinking, wow, yeah. In a sense, you could say, well, we should be doing this. The people who are from Bradford, we should be doing this, but we're not. You've come and you're doing things that actually we're not doing, and you're plugging gaps. And I still see the value in that. But I think you're right in saying, and that is the shift generally now in missionary work. It's not people going and saying, we can do something you can't do. No, it's saying, I want to come and help you and come alongside you and support you to do this. And the goal ultimately is for it to leave and for it to be completely local. So like you said, why can't people in Asia? Well, that should be the goal. So if you're going as a missionary somewhere to kind of justify your existence there and to set up your own little kingdom and to do a little work there that kind of is self-serving, then don't go on the mission field. You're there to go to equip local people to do the work, and then when you've done that, to leave. So yeah, that is the goal. The goal is that Indigenous people will evangelize their own people. But sometimes there's requirement for a bit of support in doing that, especially where the gospel is breaking out and it's very new, because you have people getting saved, but leaders who need a bit of support initially, some training, some grounding in theology, and especially in the Bible and in interpreting the Bible. They need that support then to go on and to do that work. So yeah, in a country like Nepal where the church is very young, there was a big need. There still is definitely a need. But I would hope, in the next 10 years that you'd see a reduction in the missionary work that says you're able to do it. But then there's another side of missionary work, which is a more kind of social work. And I think there's still a need for that. So hospitals, education, there's always going to be a need for that. But if you're doing missionary work more focused around discipleship and evangelism, that should be shorter term. Let's equip the leaders and let's move out and let them pass on what they've learned to other leaders.
Okay, that makes sense. That cross-cultural experience itself, because I have learned a lot after coming to Bradford. So I can see and, in a sense, pick and choose the things which I feel are appropriate to do in a particular set of culture versus, when I go back to India. So that learning experience is so grateful.
And we've learned a lot from you. So you bring a lot that we wouldn't get without you being here. So, and I think that's the wonderful thing about travel, and it's a global culture nowadays. So maybe missionary work is becoming more and more like an informal thing that just happens because you have travel. I mean, and early on, we're reading the book of Acts, the movement of Paul and the other apostles and the early disciples. But actually, when you look at the spread of Christianity early on, it can't be explained by just those movements in Acts. The gospel boomed, and it happened by just ordinary people traveling, moving for work, traveling to go and find work and a better future in a different place, and taking the gospel with them. And over a few centuries, you have the gospel all over the world. And it wasn't just from formal missionary work, it was from that informal kind of travel of believers just going and taking the gospel with them. So, yeah, in that sense, maybe missionary work is going to become more and more informal and just a natural byproduct of a global society.
Okay, thank you. To kind of now go into another segment. Let's say I am an individual Christian or a couple with a family and want to think about missions. How could one prepare? And both from a training perspective, but also from a personal, spiritual level perspective of what they should start doing that they can answer this call to missions.
A few things. I think they should do some training, whether that's going to seminary, going to Bible college, doing a long course, or whether it's a shorter term kind of missions training program. I think you should definitely do some training. I think you should speak to missionaries. So whether that's connected with your church, or if not, find some missionaries who are connected to your friends' churches and have some conversations, kind of like we're doing now, and say, what's it like? What's been easy? What have you struggled with? Learn from them. Go on some short-term missions trips and get exposed to different ways of doing missionary work and see what you connect with. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, focus upon what you're doing in the present. So if you want to get ready for the mission field, then be a missionary locally where you are. And I think that's a really good test, because, yeah, if you can't motivate yourself in your own culture to be going out into the community and to be doing the difficult kind of making the difficult steps of interacting with people and sharing the gospel and making connections and motivating yourself to do that, then it's going to be really hard on the mission field. So yeah, get some training, speak to people, speak to your local leadership. I mean, that's a big confirmation. Speak to your church, speak to your leadership there. Do they see a calling, a gifting for you to do that kind of work? And just look at your motivation in the present. What are you doing? And are you living as a missionary now? Because if you're not, it's going to be really hard for you.
So one thing which usually comes in my mind when I read about missionary stories, and to be honest, kind of a thought once about you, is that about kids. How that has been for you in your own personal life, how the kids had adjusted. Does the kids has to buy into your vision and calling, or they just adapt because kids are all, great in adapting to different situations? How do you feel the family or the kids aspect coming into play if someone wants to go out and wants to be a missionary?
Yeah, it depends on the ages of your kids. I think when your kids are younger, it's an easier decision. If your kids are older, teenagers perhaps, I do think there should be some buy-in at that point. I think there should be some discussion if you have teenage kids. We went when we've got 4 kids now. We had 3 kids initially when we went, and when our youngest was born abroad. So there wasn't too much discussion because our eldest was maybe 4 or 5 at the time when we left. If they were teenagers, yes, I think you would want to have some agreement that they're with you and they buy into the vision and they want to do it. If not, it's probably best to let them finish their education and go later. For me, that was the biggest concern and the biggest sacrifice. When you're young and single or married without kids, you don't have the same concerns, do you?
Yeah.
You just go and you're willing to count the cost and to sacrifice and to do what you feel you have to do to fulfill the call God's got in your life. But like you say, when you have children, there's a cost on them too that they didn't choose. You're choosing this cost for them. And we were on the mission field for 10 years. There was a number of times during that our missionary work where we wondered about coming home, and it was always in relation to the kids and their well-being. So I do think it's a big consideration, but also they had an amazing experience, and I feel that what we gave them through their experiences on the mission field are far greater than what they would have experienced if we just remained in Bradford. So they missed out on certain things. If you compare to the peers, they maybe didn't have the same opportunities to play sports or to do theatre and dance or different things. They didn't have those opportunities for sure. But they got to live cross-culturally, and in terms of their roundedness as human beings and what they've experienced and what they've learned, I think it's invaluable. Whether they appreciate that or not, we'll see, because I've spoken to so many missionaries over the years with older kids, and it goes both ways. You have a lot of children who look back and say, I'm just so grateful that my parents took me. I wouldn't change it for anything. You do have some children who look back, especially those who moved when they were a bit older in the teenage years, either direction. So it was really hard for me. I wish I hadn't have done that. So you have to bear that in mind. There's also a cost on your family back here and your friends who you're leaving and saying goodbye to. And that comes down to your conviction of the calling of God on your life. When you're going on the mission field, you have to really feel, I'm called to this, and have it clear in your mind. This is what God is asking us to do, and this is what I want to give my life to, and I think it's the right thing, because it will be tested. And we had seasons where our children were being homeschooled, they had no friends, they were struggling to adapt to the culture, and I don't know if it's right to use the word, but they were almost depressed. When we looked at them, you could see like a sadness, like a depression in them. There was nothing to do. They were young, they were being homeschooled, there was nowhere to go. We were in this kind of busy, at times polluted, central location in Kathmandu. It wasn't an easy place to live. They had very few friends. A day out from homeschooling would be to go to a coffee shop. For a 5-year-old, you should be going to a field, you should be running around, you should be in a playground, you should be jumping in a river, you should be doing fun things, or going to a museum. But we'll go to a coffee shop and we'll get a milkshake. And it was really hard to look at the kids and think, wow, they're struggling because of our decision. And we would just go back to our sense that God had called us to do this. And I think, if God's called you to do that, God's going to look after them. And eventually things came into place for them to go to an international school. And God provided, like all of our concerns. Initially, we didn't want to do that. We didn't want them to be in an international environment. We wanted to be fully immersed in the local culture. And we saw going to an international school as a bit of a compromise initially, to be honest. But we did that for longevity, because looking after our kids and doing that gave us the peace to keep going in the work that we were doing. And but it's definitely a consideration. I mean, it'd be interesting if my kids were here to ask them if they're happy. But even when we talk about things now, we've been back in the UK for coming up to a year, not even a year yet, and they still miss Nepal. They're saving up money to go back next year. If you ask them, would you rather live here in Nepal? Generally speaking, depends what day it is, but most of the time they say, would rather be back in Nepal.
Which is true. I have asked them a few times often. They told they are saving up money. They're raring to go back to Nepal.
So that's wonderful. And you can look as a parent, Kat, you have a different perspective, a more mature perspective. And I look at, especially my teenage girls, and I think, wow, you've learned so much through your experiences. You are mature beyond your years. you have this kind of global perspective on things, and you've learned a lot, and it's been an amazing experience for you. And I hope that's what they feel when they grow up. You don't know.
So last Sunday evening, when we were having the World Mission Action Team, so one theme was very clear that the field is vast and workers are not that much there. Do you feel that the church is equipped, or is church equipping people to be, to be missionaries, or to go out, or is there a sense that, yeah, busy is a church, and we keep the people there in the church to grow the, to sustain that church, or they want to send out people, like when I was reading Acts 14, I was a bit surprised that they let Paul go. You had the best man in your church, and you could grow it as a, mega church center of Christianity, as is to say, Antioch. They were willing to send him out. That was quite surprising, and to be honest, a bit anti-Indian way, because you don't let your best talent go out. Do you feel that's maybe not intentionally, but church don't condition, maybe that may be not a correct word, but then encourage people to go out and serve in missions because the field is vast?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to do, and it's the right thing to do when you have an abundance of good leaders and able people in the church, is to say to them, move on. There's more to be done. We don't need so many gifted worship leaders in one church. We don't need so many gifted speakers. Let's expand and move out, whether that's planting churches or doing things within the UK or going abroad. But you're right, it's very hard to do because people want to hold on to the best people. And there is maybe a bit of a stereotype that often missionaries are kind of the quirky people in the church who go and I mean, maybe people say that about me and Hannah, I don't know. But a sense of, well, you're a bit, you can go. we'll send you, I mean, that's not my experience. The missionaries in Nepal from many different countries were incredibly gifted and brilliant people who you would want in any church. So I do think a lot of churches still have this missional mindset and are willing to send the best people and to get behind them financially and all of the effort that it takes to do that. But it's a real mix. I mean, if I think about churches that I know in the UK, it's definitely a mix. Some are really missional in the thinking and very active and looking to recruit people and to send them and very active in that. Other churches, not so much. And for a lot of churches in the UK now, there's a feeling we need to focus on missions locally, which I completely agree with. I think first and foremost, as a church, your focus is to be missional in your region, in your area. But it's not an either or. I think as well, it's to have that global mindset and to be willing to send people to unreached people groups as well. So we need to do a bit of both, but it's mixed. Some churches are great at it, other churches maybe less so.
Okay. Probably a last question in this line. What are the some things when somebody is going out in a mission should be, in a sense, that what somebody could expect, the unexpected things which they could see in a mission field?
I think you've got to go to training and expect the unexpected. I would probably want to prepare people around being ready for loneliness, because you're leaving often family, community, and you're going into a foreign culture where you might not fit in, and you might struggle to adjust and understand people or to be understood. And you've got to be ready for loneliness. I had some amazing friends in Nepal, some really, really wonderful friends that I would call family now. However, even though I learned the language as best I could, and I fully immersed myself in the culture as best I could, I was still a foreigner. and I always would have been if I was there for 40, 50 years. You can't change that. And when people would visit from the UK and I'd meet them, I would feel this connection right away because it's my culture. And right away I'd think, I get you and I can connect with you. And it was more kind of clear to me, this connection that I'd never realized before, because I thought, it's so easy for me just to have this conversation and to get you because we're from the same place. We get one another automatically. And there is a struggle when you're in a different culture of, yes, you can learn things. And yes, you can get your head around how things operate as best you can and get to know people. But you're always a foreigner. And there's a loneliness to that for sure. So I'd be ready for loneliness and be ready for the mundane as well, because people get inspired for the mission field by reading biographies and incredible stories of miracles and sacrifice and successes and great disappointments as well. But it's all extremes. You read about the extremes. But in between the extremes, there's a lot of mundane stuff as well, of turning up to the office every day or whatever it is. You know, if you completely on your own and then you can waking up and saying, okay, I'm going to go to the coffee shop today. I'm not going to try and start a conversation. I'm going to do the same thing, and just being faithful and faithful and faithful. So if people are going thinking, wow, this is going to be an adventure, it's going to be so exciting. Yes, it will be an adventure. Yes, you'll have some amazing stories. But in between those amazing stories, there's a lot of days where you just have to do what you do back here and be faithful and turn up and get on with it. So yeah, be ready for the mundane and be ready for loneliness as well.
Mundane and loneliness. Do you have any story, any memorable story or incident from your stay in Nepal?
Yeah, I have lots I could share. But I think of a story I always love to tell is about a young guy called Dawa Sherpa. So he's from the mountain region from close to Everest. So I went to visit his home. From his home, you're high up in the mountains at his home, and you can see in the distance, just small, you can see Mount Everest. But just a really, really beautiful place. But he was blind, and he came to study at the college I was working at, and he was just so devout, incredibly poor. I didn't realize how poor he was. He would come down in the winter without socks on, and it's freezing up there. So he wouldn't have socks. He'd have just ripped up clothes, and being blind, he wasn't really aware, of how he looked, and didn't have people around him to care for him. Had just muddy, dirty, ripped, basic clothes. Very poor guy. Very clever. Very, very clever. Very humble. Very genuine. And he met a Christian who shared the gospel. His family said, if you're a Christian, we don't want you living here. So he moved, and we're talking a few-day journey to get from his home to Kathmandu. A crazy, crazy journey. So I did this journey a few times. It is absolutely crazy. Hiking, jeeps, huge drops. I'm adventurous, but it was scary. But he came all the way to Kathmandu without knowing anyone. Eventually found our Bible college through having some chats. And we're just so zealous. Couldn't read the Bible himself, but would listen to the audio Bible. Would spend just hours and hours every day praying. I mean, he got us into trouble at one point because we had some people coming from immigration to have a look around at the college, and him being blind, didn't realize who we were speaking to, and they said, "What are you doing?" And he just shared everything. He had no idea. He was thinking, I'm just sharing with some kind of, some partners in the ministry, and he shared everything and got us into trouble. But just from the most basic background, became a Christian, said, I want to have some training, went back to his village. His family wouldn't welcome him back, kept sharing the gospel. After a long time, his family became Christians. A few of the neighbours did. Said, I want to start a church. Started a church. As this wonderful congregation of, I think now around 60, 70 people in his village, all Sherpas, all previously Buddhist. He's from a family of of priests who were really devout, all Christian. He listens to the Bible on an audio player, prepares the sermons in his head, preaches on a Saturday, churches on a Saturday in Nepal from memory. And there's a lot of other stories like this, and I think that's really the legacy of our time, is in investing in people like this. You know, it wasn't for me to go up into the mountains to be the one kind of sharing the good news on the mountains. It was for me to be equipping this guy and to be training him and teaching him and say, Dell, you go do it. And yeah, that kind of fruit is what I look back at and think, there's a lot of people who have been touched by our ministry who are now doing great things. And that's really the fruit. And that gives you a sense of, well, of what the church is like in Nepal. You mentioned it earlier, I think I didn't get onto it, but the church is, I would say, very, very, very simple, very new, very pure for the most part. Kathmandu's a different kettle of fish to churches out in the remote areas, but churches in the remote areas are simple, pure and passionate, and people are hungry for the gospel and for the Bible. And we've mentioned the book of Acts that we teach in church. When I hear the book of Acts being read or read it myself or hear sermons on it, I think, wow, this is what Nepal is like. In certain areas, like I said, Kathmandu is a lot more similar to kind of what church is like here. Out in these villages, you just have people moving around, sharing the gospels, whole villages converting, and just this real freshness and life. It's really exciting.
It is very interesting, the point you mentioned about the pure church perspective. I remember around 10 years back, we, like our home church, we were on a tour to different places. And on a particular Sunday, we had we attended a church of a pastor whom we knew. And I remember afterwards, and the young boys were chatting, and like, if we keep coming here for bit longer, we might get converted, in the sense that we might be genuine Christians now, rather than the usual Christians we have. And we could feel that. Now that church didn't had a music band like we had. They didn't had a screen like we had. They didn't had an air conditioning like we had nothing at all. But something about the worship was there. We all felt it the way that, glad. It would have been amazing if we would be there more than. But everybody's coming was like, we might be good Christians if we keep coming here. So yeah, there is something different of those kind of churches. Cool. Now some quick rapid fire round before we close. This is an important one. Chai or English tea?
Chai, or chia we say in Nepal, but yeah, chai definitely. I'm not a tea drinker. I would still choose coffee over both.
Okay.
But I miss milk tea. Matala tea, yeah.
Good. If you wanted to meet somebody from the biblical period, of the people who mention the Bible, whom it would be and why?
Oh gosh, I can't say one person. That's too difficult. I think just because I'm reading it right now, I would love to meet David. Because I just find his faith fascinating, because you're given this wonderful insight in the Psalms as to the struggles he goes through and all of the wrestling he has with God. I'd love to talk to him about his faith and kind of get my head around what his faith looked like.
Yeah. Okay. Your favorite missionary?
Probably have to say, it's a bit cliche, but Jim Elliot, just because that was the first. Maybe Hudson Taylor as well. They were maybe the two early biographies that I read that really, really inspired me.
Hudson Taylor.
Hudson Taylor, the good Yorkshireman.
Yes. I actually Googled his address on Google Street. They have a mall now at that place.
Wow.
Yeah. But I did search that. One book which you would recommend to anybody who wants to think about missions?
Oh, I would, maybe say Hudson Taylor's spiritual secrets, because I feel the primary thing to know as a missionary before you go is to value the culture into which you're going and to immerse yourself into it. And I think he's probably the first and best early example of doing that, of going. And I think that's, I mentioned earlier, one thing that we have to be careful about, especially going from the West to developing countries, is that we don't go with any sense of, we're here to help you, we know what we're doing, let us show you how to do it. There has to be a humility in coming and saying, I want to be like you, I appreciate, I have a lot to learn from you, and this is kind of a partnership of learning. And I think, I would say look at Hudson Taylor's example for that.
This is the last one, and probably the funniest one. What is the funniest thing that has happened to you in Nepal?
Oh, funniest and most embarrassing. I would say the most embarrassing, I won't say exactly what it was, but there's one word that I was mispronouncing regularly. And I think I mispronounced it speaking publicly. And I mispronounced it on a number of occasions when I had guests round. And I kept offering people a certain thing, a certain word that I was mispronouncing. And it meant something very different, very rude. And I think nobody told me for a while until somebody kind of had the courage to say, Sam, when you're saying this word, you have to pronounce the last letter because it means something very different. And then when I went back and thought about all the times I use it, I thought, I've been saying for a long time this terrible word and nobody told me. I'm sure there were other things that people didn't tell me, but that was one.
Great. Well, that brings us to an end. Sam, it has been fascinating to hear your journey a bit more in detail, and also the mission world, right now. I really hope that people, take encouragement from this, and also, try to equip themselves if they need. So thank you so much. And thanks once again to being on Salt and Light podcast.
Thank you. It was a joy.
That was such a great conversation with Sam. Honestly, I'm blown away. Hearing about his journey from Bradford to serving in other parts of the world reminds us that following Jesus often leads us to places of challenge, growth, and deep dependence on God. I hope today's episode has encouraged you to think more about how we can support those who give themselves to a ministry, and also to consider how God might be calling you to live missionally right where you are. Thanks for tuning into Salt and Light podcast. If you have been blessed by this conversation, please share it with a friend, leave comments, and subscribe for more encouraging stories and discussion. So until next time, let's be salt, let's be light.